Welcome back. In this lecture, we will implement a camera movement, since we might want to add other buildings later and not be limited to a small portion of the map. So let's create a new script, and I'm going to call this one camera movement. Camera movement, like so. I'm going to assign this script to my main camera, because that's the one that is the one that I want to move. So let's go ahead and drag this camera movement script in here. All right, and now let's go over to the script. So what is it that I want to set up here? So on one hand, how fast I can move the mouse or the camera, and then where the limitations of the camera are. So I'm going to create a left and the right border, as well as a speed. So let's create those variables here. The speed of our camera, I'm going to set that to 1.8 for now. And then the left and the right border, which will be transforms. So basically locations or positions. So we can get rid of the start method as we won't need it, but we will need a method that will clamp our movement. Now, before we start writing our movement logic, we need to write a tool that can clamp or limit the movement of our camera position between 2 points, which are going to be our left and right borders. So those two that we have set up here, and it should be something like this. Okay, so I'm going to create this method and let's go over it. So this method here, this clamp method, will get a vector3. We're using the reference keyword once again. And here, let's do it like this. So this should limit a vector between two other vectors. So that's the idea behind what we're doing here. The value is passed by reference, so we don't need to return anything. So we're not changing a copy of it, but we're changing the actual vector. And then we get the x value of that vector3 and we're clamping it. We are clamping it between the left border position x and the right border position x. The same goes for the y and the z coordinates. So we do that for all three of them. We're reassigning the x, y, and z value of the vector that we are passing. So whatever we're clamping, that thing will be overwritten with the limitations that we have here. Now in the update method, we will use the touch input of our input system. So now if we look at our camera, because it is rotated by 90 degrees around the y-axis, it is easier to move along the z-axis. So if you play around with the z-axis here, you see, so if we're playing around with the z, I think this is the easiest where we can move around. So we could go ahead and build more buildings on that z-axis and position them accordingly. So back in the script, in the camera movement script, instead of the update method, we can check if the input was a touch. And if it has a touch count of greater than 0, so we know that there was a touch, then we get the touch phase and we see if it was moved. So there is this thing, if input dot get touch, so we get the touch, where it was and what it was and so forth, and we check the first touch and its phase. So what is the phase? The phase is the phase of the touch. Okay, so we check the touch phase, which is an enum here, and it can be, for example, that something moved. So we didn't just click on something, but we actually moved the touch. So basically we're saying, if we dragged, then run this code. And what I'm going to get is the delta touch position. So where was the touch? So let's get the input get touch at that position 0 and get its delta position. So the position since last change. So how big the movement was. So that's what we're going to store in this vector2. So how far did we move? And then we are going to calculate the new position for our camera. So this will be a little more complicated. Let me add the comments here. So if you want to read through the details here. And actually I can read them for you as well. So our new position for the camera will be our current position plus a new vector equals to our delta position x times the speed times delta time. And then to make the movement smooth, we used a minus before the touch delta positions because we want to swipe or move the camera in the position direction of the touch direction. Okay, so otherwise it would be counterintuitive because it would move us the other way around than we are dragging. So basically we're saying the new position will be the same for the X and Y value, but it will be using the touch delta position, the X value of it, in the negative way, multiplied with however much time has passed since the update method was called, multiplied with the speed that we have defined here. Okay, so that's what this vector3 will do for us. And now we can go ahead and use this position and use it as a reference in our clamp here. So we use the clamp method and we pass the new pause like so. And then we can use that to change the position of the camera to be the new position, like so. All right, so now let's save the script and let's get back to Unity. All right, so back here, let's go ahead and create an empty game object. Let's call it right border. And then another one and call it left border. And now let's copy the values from our main camera. So copy the component. Let's go over here and paste the component into our transform. So here, paste component values. So now it will be at the same position as our main camera. And now we can change that value. So let's go over to our right border. So it will be at the same position as our main camera, as I stated. And now we can decide where we want to move it. So how far do we want to go towards the right in this border here? So let's say I will limit it all the way up to here. So let's just move this blue line of our right border over to, let's say, -100 in my case. So this value will vary for you, okay? And then let's copy this value here. Copy the component. Let's use it in the left border. Let's paste the component values and then let's move it over to further to the left, so to speak, here. So let's say we limit it so that we can go all the way up to here. So let's say a z value of 0. Okay, and now we can assign those values for our left border and right border. What's important is that the rotations are the same as we have in our main camera. So our main camera now needs a left border transform, so let's drag that in there, and the right border transform, so let's drag that in there. And now you would actually have to go to build settings and then build it for Android, drag the file onto your Android device or your emulator and then test it there. And then you can move your camera around to the left and right using the touchscreen on your Android device.